This past week, Kim Jong-un met with Vladimir Putin at the easternmost spaceport in Russia. No official communiques or joint statements came out of this meeting, although analysts are speculating that Putin is in need of weapons and Kim Jong-un is in need of satellite technology and assistance with the space program. Miles, what do you make of this development?
Well, Russia and North Korea are now the two internationally renowned pariah states, desperately in need of each other. Neither can really go, Vladimir Putin and Kim, neither can go anywhere without taking great personal security risk. Kim is the king of paranoia. Putin is a wanted international war criminal, so they couldn't travel any far. So maybe for Kim, the safe country to travel for him is Russia. And Kim also has invited Putin to visit North Korea. That's probably the only country Putin can really go safely without really a big problem. Putin couldn't even go to BRICS summit in South Africa a few weeks ago. Now, you mentioned about this substantial arms deal and technological cooperation. That's for real. It goes both ways. What Kim Jong-un could give to Putin are sort of low-end weapons, particularly shells and artillery pieces. But also another thing, I think maybe in light of the collapse of the Wagner Group, which was pretty much like a commando special operations force that really is not working anymore. So North Korea has the world's largest commando or special operation force. In numbers, it's staggering 140,000 strong. So maybe, Kim could give Putin some kind of a capability in the commando area, at least a training, right, for operation in Ukraine. This is remain to be seen, but this is a very likely scenario. But what Putin can give Kim is much, much more. It will be in the three key areas. Number one, North Korea is a country that's constantly on the verge of starvation and famine. So Russia is one of the world's largest grain export countries. So Russia can provide stable food supply to North Korea. Secondly, Russia is also a country of great energy. So North Korea is a highly militarized regime. It has over 1 million strong military running all kinds of machines, war machines. So North Korea has enormous needs for energy, gas and oil. That's what Russia could provide. Number three, I think most importantly, is Russia's capability to help North Korea modernize its obsolete weapons of 1950s vintage. Modern warfare platforms, particularly satellites, is important. North Korea keeps failing to launch satellites lately. So this is why the summit was held in the satellite launch spot. And also, Russia could substantially upgrade North Korea's big submarine fleet. North Korea has over 60 submarines. They're all really old, obsolete antiques. So Russia could provide really advanced, even next-generation submarine technologies to North Korea, and in addition to missile technologies also. So that is where in the realm of arms negotiation and mutual support. Now, there is a big subtest here. That is, North Korea traditionally depends heavily on China. You can say even is an over-reliance on China, particularly in the areas of food supply and energy supply. So North Korea now realize China can be extremely opportunistic. It has no principle. So when you really are in need, China may not come to your help. So North Korea also has a supply chain problem. It wants to diversify its strategic supply chain. So going to Russia is definitely a plan B. Having said all this kind of rapprochement has a very profound unintended consequence. It shows to the world threat of this kind, aggression, from Moscow and Pyongyang were actually a global problem. Therefore, it has provided another strong impetus and reason for NATO alliance, for example, to expand its footprint to Asia Pacific, as Japan, South Korea, and many other countries in the region have been advocating.
For our next topic, China's defense minister Li Shangfu has been missing for over 2 weeks now, and China's foreign ministry has been rather cagey as to why. It looks like we're seeing another instance in the series of high-level disappearances we witnessed this summer, beginning with China's foreign minister, or former foreign minister, Qin Gang, who has been missing since June 25th. It appears Li is under investigation for corruption, particularly a broad probe regarding the procurement of military equipment. Miles, could you tell us a bit about Li Shangfu, who he is, his relationship to Xi Jinping, and why you think he's gone missing?
Li Shangfu was the senior PLA leader who was responsible for a long time for armament and equipment. It was in that role that he did an illicit arms deal with Russia, who was under sanction. So for that reason, he was sanctioned by the United States government. And I think out of spite, Xi Jinping picked him as defense minister, hoping that the U.S. would have to really lift the sanction on him. That didn't happen. So he became a very big inconvenience in global military engagement. Not just the United States, but also United States allies would have a major problem, have had a problem, meeting with a sanctioned defense minister of China. His removal could indicate that China's intention to broaden its military engagement with other countries. But I don't believe for a moment that he was sacked because of corruption. I mean, if that's the case, they could have found out this corruption cases long before he was even given the position in charge of the equipment and armament, even before the defense minister post. Defense minister is a relatively unimportant post anyway. It's still ceremonial, dealing with protocol issues with foreign counterparts. But most importantly, I think it's also indicated that Xi Jinping's increasing paranoia over military disloyalty. This is particularly acute after the Wagner insurrection in Russia. And you can see immediately after the Wagner insurrection in Russia, and the PLA's rocket force chiefs were all sacked. This is another episode of Xi Jinping's paranoia behavior. So it shouldn't be a surprise to everybody.
I want to press a bit further and ask you what you think Xi Jinping's thinking is here. Just generally with these disappearances, I mean, to the rest of the world, it looks insane that high-level officials would simply go missing like this. One can't even imagine, for example, a U.S. Secretary of State, Qin Gang's equivalent, going missing and quietly being replaced without a word from the U.S. government. Is Xi blind to the fact that these actions are seriously out of step with the rest of the international community and that they erode his legitimacy as a leader in the eyes of other countries? Does he simply not care? Or rather, is his control so fragile and his situation so desperate that he simply sets these concerns aside?
We have to understand the internal mechanism of how the government in China works. She really doesn't care about what outside the world. Look at how he purges so-and-so. There's always a convenient cover of corruption, anti-corruption. Now, we have to understand, General Li Shangfu is among the very few so-called second-generation Reds. In other words, he had this communist gene. His father was a long marcher, marched with Mao. So he had this kind of a communist hereditary blue blood or red blood in this case. And that is what Xi Jinping worry about most, because with that kind of credential, if there is any kind of disenchantment within the PLA, which there has been a lot, considering how many senior military officials have been sacked by Xi Jinping, it's very likely people like General Li with a perfect red credential could become the place to go to for the disenchanted officers to basically vent their displeasure. So Li could potentially be a leader in this anti-Xi faction within the PLA. Now, this is all in Xi Jinping's head, but this is what exactly he's fear about. And he has been doing this consistently, starting with the purging of the Communist Party viceroy of Chongqing, Bo Xilai, and then you can go on and on to now. And there has been rumor about another second-generation Reds within the PLA high command, who is even more senior to Li, that is the Vice Chairman Zhang Youxia, Vice Chairman of CMC. He has been missing too. So there's been a lot of rumors that he's also in trouble with Xi. This is an endless cycle of purge after purge. It's a perfectly logical if you read Chinese Communist Party history.
In other news, China's current foreign minister, Wang Yi, met with Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, for 2 days of dialogue in Malta this past weekend. Both sides have said the conversations were candid, substantive, and constructive. Miles, we've heard optimism like this before. We have had these consistent cabinet-level meetings throughout the summer, and yet tensions seem to increase between the U.S. and China despite this. In your estimation, was this meeting any different?
If you see the readouts by both White House and Chinese government, the information is quite uninformative. But there is a particular background to this. This meeting was meant to bargain and negotiate the conditions for Xi to attend the November 2023 APEC meeting in San Francisco. That's the Asia Pacific Economic Conference, which is to be hosted by President Biden. So this is a big deal since Xi has consistently been playing hard to get. He didn't show up at the G20. Biden team is eager to engage Xi. But China is really interesting because China now believes openly that engagement and containment by the United States are both part of the U.S. conspiracy. And it demands the White House to show sincerity in engaging China. I mean, how do you show your sincerity when you say, I want to meet the Secretary General Xi? If China has its way, would the White House would show its sincerity? That would mean total submission to China's demands and return to the good old days of appeasement. This is not going to happen. If you look at the Wang Yi really does not as much power as people think. Yes, he's China's foreign policy czar, but today's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not doing its job, which is supposed to show the civilized or diplomatic side of one country's national policy. No, right now, under Xi, China's national policy is one of uncivilized, hooligan, and mafia nature. So if you look at the foreign ministry in China, it's often hijacked by either its own nasty and mendacious wolf warriors, such as those spokespersons who are kind of clownish, Hua Chunyin, Zhao Lijian, or they were ordered to carry out foreign policy by China's security agencies, particularly the Ministry of State Security. The Ministry of State Security has been publishing foreign policy articles in China, which basically it says that in many of China's recent engagement with the United States are driven and operated by directives from the MSS. For example, the MSS directive in early September, it says China should never give in to U.S. double tricks of engagement plus containment. You show sort of a good policy to stop China from behave in a malign way, and that's containment. And you want to be nice to China, you engage with them like the Biden team wants to do, and they also say that's just the part of the conspiracy in disguise. The MSC also urged the nationwide mobilization of catching foreign spies. So this is all really is doing what the foreign ministry is supposed to do, but it's hijacked by the national security apparatus inside China. I even would venture to guess that the sacking of many of the senior leaders, including Foreign Minister Qin Gang, for example, may have something to do with clashing with those mafia figures in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I think the real problem, Jake Sullivan has faced in dealing with China, if the Biden team wants Xi Jinping to come to San Francisco, because Xi Jinping, wherever he goes, he wants to be treated like the emperor of the world, the most prominent global leader, and not just one of the ordinary member states' leaders. So his egomaniac displeasure at the South Africa BRICS summit, for example, a few weeks ago, it showed this very, very well. One of the reasons that he didn't want to show up in India is because India refused to treat him like the emperor of the world. Another thing is the difficulty that U.S. faces in arranging meeting with Xi is that Xi Jinping is perhaps the only national leader in major international summits of any kind who does not speak any foreign language in general and English in particular. He's someone with only an elementary school education. So he's very awkward and uncomfortable when it comes to international summits. There's another side of this is that the China's national security paranoia is bizarre because I think that Jake Sullivan probably talked with Wang Yi about the logistics for the world's emperor to San Francisco. You look at the Xi Jinping's trip to Johannesburg in South Africa for the BRICS summit a few weeks ago, for example. Xi Jinping's entourage was ridiculous. It involves a 500 personnel security detail. And they have to check in to 2 Chinese-owned hotels. And all furniture, bed sheets, phone set, shower towels that Xi Jinping will use during this BRICS summit had to be flown in from China. All of Xi Jinping's personal discharges in the bathroom were collected by the Chinese security team to preclude any DNA or biometric information from being collected by China's enemies and foreign spies, real or imagined. So we know all this because South Africa's security chief went on TV and with great bemusement, he talked about this difficulty dealing with China's security detail. So I'm sure that when Xi Jinping, if he wants to come to San Francisco, the ultimate enemy zone from the Chinese CCP perspective, he would have to demand enormous security guarantee like the one, even more than the one he did to the South Africans.
Do you expect the U.S. to capitulate to these demands for royal treatment? Would that even be prudent from the U.S. perspective? And what would be the best that we could expect out of a meeting like this in terms of U.S.-China relations?
I think Xi Jinping has to come down from the sky and to the earth and realize that he's just one of the many leaders, right? He's not the emperor of the world. So hopefully that the White House could persuade him to come to San Francisco to deal with the real issues. There was a lot of issues China played a very important role, crucial role from global health point of view, from global security and supply chain. This engagement, unfortunately, China see all sorts of U.S. action toward China as part of this anti-CCP conspiracy. And this is basically, China does not behave like a big country. It should be. In my view, I don't think China should be qualified to sit in the Security Council as a permanent member because it acts like a giant crybaby, and that's what it is.